Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jamie Sane. I'm from Convercent. I'll be your host of this webinar. Today's topic, really great topic, is embracing the challenge of compliance, driving an effective compliance program. I'm sure it's something that's at the top of everyone's mind lately. Just a couple quick housekeeping things before we start. We will be recording this webinar. I will be sending out that recording along with a copy of the presentation slides to you shortly after the webinar completes. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them either via chat or the question feature on your control panel to the side. We'll get to those at the end. We should have about 10 or 15 minutes. So anything you're curious about, I'm sure Joe will be more than happy to give you his opinion and see if he can help out. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to the Convercent Chief Strategy Officer, Mr. Joe Labat.
Thank you, Jamie, and welcome everyone today to this discussion. And I'm happy to be here, and thanks for taking a moment of your day to join us. We do a Convercent like two-way discussion, so webinar is by its definition a one-way discussion. So we hope that we stimulate a little thought with you all today, enough to lead to follow-on two-way discussions. Just a little bit about me, more than anything. I enjoy the space, and even though I've spent most of my career as a technologist, I've spent the latter portion of my career really as a practitioner in the space. As a sister industry with the internal or the Institute of Internal Auditors, as well as the National Association of Corporate Directors, and we'll spend some time on that during the discussion because as we see with our stakeholders, with the board and the executive committee, some of the things in embracing the challenge of compliance with these stakeholders are starting to loom large and can really provide a lot of value in our roles as compliance officers. We always like in our bios to bring in the personal side here too. So Convercent is a software company. We exist to provide risk-based global compliance solutions to the compliance function, and we're based in Denver, Colorado. So I'm a little bit of an outlier. I live in South Florida, and my first visit out to Denver, I decided I would try to ride a mountain bike up the mountain, and my colleagues have not let me live that down. So that's my goal, is to try to live that down. Anyone who is intrepid enough to try that, my suggestion is don't, especially if you're used to 0 feet sea level. Moving on, though, here is kind of the parameters of our discussion today. We're going to speak a little to the state of compliance, the need for transparency and visibility. I really like to speak to, real-world stories, anecdotes, kind of tales from the front, what we've heard from your peers, our peers, in our discussions, and there's some really interesting, meaty ones. And I've really appreciated the candor that compliance officers and their staffs have shared over the last, call it, 10 to 14 months, especially now that we're seeing some very solid guidance being handed out by the jurisdiction, DOJ, SEC, our overseas counterparts. I think we have some overseas colleagues that have signed up. Myself, personally, I'm going to be in the United Kingdom next week. Very interestingly, last year at this time, there was a big move for direct centralization of the compliance function, hardline reporting, globally, rather than kind of a matrix effect, when you talk about global business unit leadership. So it'll be interesting to see 12 months later how that's working out. So we are, no revelation here. We're working in a cross-borders, multi-theater world now, and and we need to think about building compliance programs that are global in nature and stand up to multi-jurisdictional challenges and requirements. And then we'll talk in the latter stages of our discussion today, approaching compliance in a different way. And this is where we as Convercent really kind of start our day and end our day every day, thinking about how technology should be an equalizer to our constituents, which are everyone on this phone, in building and driving effective compliance programs. So that's really our scope of discussion today, and hopefully that'll lead to broader discussions down the line with each of you. So, I think we all have been, in this space long enough to, and in our companies long enough to know that this industry is one that we can pick up a periodical, and it's kind of like an old episode of Law and Order, ripped from the headlines. You can see here, and you can almost do a quarterly refresh on any of these risks and oversight, risks of non-compliance. You see here, this is FCPA. FCPA fines aren't going away. Legislative risks. Supply chain risk is obviously something that's on our minds as a compliance function, especially in the last 18 to 24 months. Operational risks and reputational risks. Interestingly enough, Mr. Diamond at J.P. Morgan Chase, 4 years ago, was considered the best risk manager on Wall Street, and now there's deluge of headlines saying, does he deserve to keep his job? So this is. I personally don't believe we should run our businesses or functions based on, fear and uncertainty and doubt. But this is more of a level setting. How did we get here? How did we get here? Well, this is one way, but it's also an end. There's something that got us to this point, and we can debate. How we got here, but the after effect here is, if we look for the general theme, it's a lack of transparency, visibility, and connectivity has led to increased board and executive participation. There's no argument that all of this, after effect of headlines in real tangible effect to companies, whether they've happened to your company or they've happened to a peer set company of yours, the question, have board of directors and CEOs really become risk managers? Have they become active participants in the risk and compliance function of companies? Well, let's look at the data, and there is a lot of good substantive data out there. And if you look at just from the board function, this is a graph from the National Association. I'll put my mouse in play, even though it tends to get a little hyperactive on webinars. National Association of Corporate Directors, a fresh survey, 2013-2014. Very interesting here. Obviously, we all know boards have specific committees around risk oversight, audit committee and risk committee. But the question posed to the board here is, where should risk oversight be allocated? 53%, over half of public boards said full board. It's all of our problem, or all of our opportunity, if you will. That has a lot of power. If you look now at the CEO level, now this is a true global study. If you see down here, out of about 1,300 companies, you can tell here by our absence of Z's and more S's, it is global in nature. And let me kind of really set the context of this question here. It was a long, very robust, meaty, very interesting report. I'd recommend it to anyone. Good, 30-plus page report that really talked about, as a CEO, as a global CEO, what's on your mind? What's going to be looking 5 years out? what are going to be some strategic initiatives and some strategic decisions you're going to have to make to continue to steward your business. So, you had, very important geopolitical factors, the human condition, right? Items such as this. But the question posited here was, in order to capitalize on trends which you believe will most transform your business over the next 5 years, to what extent are you making changes? And the legend here is kind of from the right of the graph down. We have decided to make a change program. It's underway or it's completed. We have concrete plans to implement change program, developing strategy to change, or recognize that you need this change. So use and management of data and data analytics, approach to managing risk and corporate governance. So you see here, large numbers under, hey, we are starting, we're not even considering. It's underway, or we've completed, or we have concrete plans. So those are large numbers to the right of the graph. So, to this theoretical question asked here, the answer is a resounding yes. So moving on here, as I said before, I'm a member of the National Association of Corporate Directors, and as you would expect and hope for, it's a very rich membership. Very very good content provided. Not only in the sessions and the opportunities to collaborate with your peers, but also in the information they put out. So I actually took a picture of this when I was on a plane just 2 weeks ago, the latest periodical put out, and as you can see here in this picture, there's an actual pullout pamphlet on board perspectives on risk, the intersection of technology, strategy, and risk. No less than half the article's themes are on risk oversight related topics. So as you say here, you are what you read. Risk oversight themes front and center. And as I've talked to compliance officers, it's actually very encouraging. Maybe not encouraging for all of you to spend more time with your boards, but quite honestly, it is very encouraging that reporting lines, or at the very least, separate sessions, are now being set up with compliance officers. As we all know, that's kind of been going on with the audit function for some time now. That they've had either direct line or at the very least dotted line reporting structures. Mostly now, the order of the day is direct line reporting structures to the board. But seeing those kind of green sprouts for the compliance function as well. So I will now also say now this graph. Optimizing programs and addressing risk are top of mind for the CFO, especially post-crisis. Now, I think if you don't have a specific statistic in here on kind of reporting structure of CCO, it's still clear majority, 2/3, 3/4, probably up through GC. There is still some CFO in there. There's still, some areas of, major areas of interaction here. But this was a post-crisis study about 2011. Which of these tasks are more important than 3 years ago? We've highlighted the ones that are most associated with risk oversight, compliance oversight. You can see here cost management, still 65%, but improving risk management, corporate governance, regulatory compliance, improving financial controls really falls into this bucket, also at 50%. But to summarize this slide is, we got through the crisis, so we're kind of wartime CFO. But the general statement is how do we ensure that we don't find ourselves in this situation as well? So we spent some time discussing how has the general attitude changed? And we could probably spend more than an afternoon discussing on how did we get to 2008, but were all these stakeholders kind of turning a blind eye to that? Maybe not. But the bottom line is, as we sit here in 2014, there is, as we've looked at, quantitative data and absolutely qualitative data that, the board especially, and then the executive band of companies are very interested in really driving a governance, a risk and compliance cadence in timber that's going to be intrinsically linked to positive business operating results. So where does that leave us? Where does that leave the chief compliance officer and the compliance function at large? So again, we'll present a little more data here. It shouldn't surprise everyone that I kind of liked baseball statistics when I was a kid. But in any case, this graph is a recent graph from the PwC State of Compliance Officer Survey that perhaps many of you saw. And again, setting up the context of this graph, those of you that perhaps like statistics and math as well will see that all these numbers do add up to more than 100%. So the respondents were able to select more than one, up to 3, I believe. But basically, the question posited here was, over the next 12 months, what are going to be your strategic, or what are going to be your areas of focus? Didn't need to be strategic. What are your areas of focus? What are you going to plan to prioritize in terms of activities in your compliance shop over the next 12 months? Now, this is quite a change if you overlaid this over previous years. And you saw 63% here was overall compliance strategy and operations, monitoring and reporting 48%, training communications 46%, risk assessment. This is probably the biggest mover on this wheel. Policies and procedures, testing and auditing, hotline and investigations, and incentives and disciplinary programs. I think this back half of the wheel, is probably the areas that have gone down the most, right? So, this is by no means says that we can just afford to be strategians, but there is the operating rigor of the compliance function that we need to be. But to me and other practitioners, it does. I've had the fortune to be around the audit function, the risk function over the last 5 years, and it heartens me to see that the compliance function is now saying, okay, we do have an opportunity to add immense business value to the organization and kind of the landscape that we're living here, because quite honestly, the risk function and the audit function also sees this opportunity as well. So, I'm also going to provide, as I said earlier, some real-world statements that we've heard, and the candor here is really quite refreshing, and kind of true tales from the front. This is, I think we've all seen this over the last 5 years. Again, as a technologist, I've sat at some of these tables and seen, kind of like a family where the aunt and the uncle and, the husband and the wife and the brother and sister, are having some let's see, robust conversations around ERM. Especially, this is really a strong statement. We must be a part of the overall ERM solution. We can't live in a vacuum from it. So that's a good, strong statement to hear in 2014, where, quite honestly, we weren't hearing a lot of those statements in 2010 and 2011. Recognize our impact on multiple dimensions of enterprise value. Focus on a risk-based approach to compliance. The audit function has really been using risk-based, for some time now. Um, you know, as I said, I am a technologist, so this one has, and I did like baseball statistics too. So, this has special dimensions to my heart here. But need to leverage technology and dashboards so we can play Moneyball with our limited resources. Now, I was remiss in mentioning at the top of the webcast, but we do offer solutions to organizations large and small. And we'll talk about that a little bit later about what modern technology does and what it should do as an equalizer. Shouldn't be just a provider to large organizations. And we'll talk about that in some of the case studies. But the gentleman who actually said this was a very name brand, multiple hundred thousands of employees, operations all over the world, first world and very third world organizations. And you would think, would have resources such that they could get any technology they want. But the elephant in the room here is obviously budgets, even though studies show that budgets are going up for compliance, the more recent ones. But this gentleman said, hey, look, I want to use technology and real-time dashboards to where, I could be like, whether you're a baseball fan or a Brad Pitt fan, I can make my investments go further. So that was pretty interesting comment. And then the last one here is, again, quite an admission of candor here, is that the executive band in BOD is looking for confidence and comprehensiveness from me in my role. And if I can't provide it, they'll look for it from the other traditional governance roles, risk audit and finance. So again, back to the title of our time together, our discussion here today, embracing the challenge of compliance. Pretty encouraging and heartening to see that a lot of our fellow practitioners kind of see what the challenge ahead is. So moving along, the DOJ and the SEC and some of our fellow sister jurisdictions from overseas have laid out some pretty strong guidance for us. So I think probably most of us, I won't assume, because I've actually talked to some practitioners that are still getting their heads wrapped around this. But I won't spend an inordinate amount of time on this other than to highlight a few things. We've heard about tone at the top, but I actually, in that same magazine, I showed the picture of NACD. I'm a big believer in the 3 lines of defense and stratifying the first line and then risk and compliance as the second line of defense, really, enabling, and then third line being audit. I actually read, about the 5 lines of defense, and you knew that was coming. But they define the first line of defense as organizational culture, which as compliance officers, obviously we spend a lot of time on that, right? And we have very robust conversations about, kind of a value-based versus rule-based culture, right? And it makes for very interesting conversations that can go well into the evening. But, what I saw there, and I don't think it's a surprise, there's tone at the top, and then there's tone at the middle, and there's tone at the bottom, right? So, there's an interesting way of doing that, and actually with technology as well. But then also down here, number 4 seems to be a very, this is one that's gaining a lot of steam, and when you look at compliance departments, is more of a newer piece that will, wait, okay, now we have very strong guidance from the DOJ in setting up effective compliance programs. And yes, we're cognitive of risk. We know what risk is. We know what risk assessments are. Have we been doing them in a repeatable, comprehensive, trackable, measurable, reportable way? That's maybe where we have opportunity areas. Number 7 as well. Obviously that's, as I mentioned earlier, is where we've gained steam over the last 18 to 14 months. So this is, guidance, is a good thing. It gives us a roadmap from where we can continue to execute. So I mentioned some real world kind of examples here. And back to kind of the large and small, and I know it seems 10,000 people probably seems pretty large, but this is actually a manufacturer that didn't have a compliance program.
And they went out and used an outside auditor to say, what should we tackle first as a new compliance department and as a manufacturing company. That auditor said, well, central place to store and disseminate corporate policies was the first priority. But as you scaled out in manufacturing, you fell into various jurisdictional laws, code of conduct. How do you keep that consistent, and how do you provide trackability, measurability, as we talked about, that consistent with transparency and visibility. This company had a strong founder presence still within it, and they wanted to maintain a strong ethical heritage as it continued rapid growth. So it's kind of along the lines of, you're growing this fast. It's kind of the airplane at 35,000 feet. Where are we headed? We're making great time. So the solution here is we worked with this company, and they selected us because of the confidence in our domain expertise and the simplicity of our user experience. So as technologists, we really look to bring that to, in the era of technology, especially if you're coming from spreadsheets and the guys with the green visors, as we said before, we understand that embracing technology, especially after kind of the track record of the last 15, 20 years, where technology, quite honestly, within businesses has become, more complex than it quite honestly needs to be. That's very important. That's very important, especially when you're not only within your compliance function, but within the user base, where potentially all employees are going to use this and maybe not use it on an everyday basis. So we worked to outline a phase 2 24-month deployment roadmap, starting immediately with policy and learning manager and risk manager, and then we would bring in our case and hotline manager later stages. So what does this look like a bit in this case? Well, here was those policies disseminated, and you can see very fresh design, but also very native, intuitive, actionable reporting to show how many of the employees had attested to that policy, code of conduct, cell phone policies, anti-bribery policies. As far as risks that could now be treated in terms of impact, velocity, likelihood, and then ranked in terms of severity, critical, high, and medium. And then going down forward, we said that over a time threshold, case health would be phased in. So again, we'll talk a little bit about what Built for Cloud, which is what our application is, gives you in terms of deployment. Doesn't need to be all at once, can be deployed stepwise. All right, so that was, still an organization of scale, but again, a compliance function that was just getting started. Okay. So the next example here is a much larger organization, global in scope, presence in 27 countries, obviously the multilingual challenges as well as data privacy challenges that you would think. Large compliance department, a good number of systems at play, but still struggling to find a solution for disclosure management. Separate and outdated systems. And then, when we talk about risk, conflicts of interest, and collection of that data, trackability of that data, going back to, again, the visibility and transparency, and then properly assessing and mitigating these risks, to financial and reputational damage are major issues. So, in this case, we take a lot of pride and we put a lot of onus on ourselves too when we're talking about disclosing something. In this case, the example we're using is perhaps a relationship disclosure or a potential conflict. Uh, what we see in the market is that word we used just a second ago, cumbersome, is a good way to look at it. If you provide an electronic medium that is kind of cumbersome, bulky, multiple clicks to a very sensitive issue, it leaves the respondent feeling perhaps even more exposed, even more vulnerable. So there's a lot of care and a lot of thoughtfulness to being for making this very vulnerable situation a more sensitive experience. So as you can see here, this UI is meant to be this. This is actually a manager being able to look at these disclosures. They can respond to that in real time. They can route these as need be. They can clear the relationships. This specific example was just pretty innocuous, but it can be reported in several different ways. And the state of the market right now is this kind of goes into one place and then it has to be worked as one place, whereas what we've developed to the market is kind of a multi-allegation perspective, where one case manager can now work different allegation strings and actually can now, based on the sensitivity, perhaps it is with the manager themselves, can now escalate and use sophisticated workflow and audit trails to take those to different management strings or regional management, or again, going back to that EU data privacy, if the respondent's from France or the respondent's from Germany, obviously different HR or data privacy rules apply, so those can be legislated within the technology as well. So kind of two examples of large and small that without technology as an equalizer, kind of gum up the works for the compliance staff, and really make embracing this challenge of a compliance officer a little more challenging. So as you see here, the disclosure management provided kind of a true partnership to really kind of look through and say, walk us through truly, the routing, how it works, how the country regional management structure works here. And, even with a built for cloud solution, we're able to provide for that. Okay, so now we're talking a little bit more about technology enabling this building and driving of an effective compliance program. So if you think of what we saw earlier, those different points of consideration, those different guidance points put forward by the U.S., put forward by our colleagues overseas, put forward by the SEC, and you think about a risk-based global compliance solution with a real-time dashboard that you saw there, and we'll go into a little bit more. We think of that in terms of three fundamental tenets from a capability standpoint. There's a design tenet, which really should allow the compliance function to think about it in terms of what are our business objectives? What truly is our business objectives as a compliance function, which then takes you back to that 63% that says, I do want to look forward. I want to spend time on strategy and objectives. My shop has got to run. It's got to run. That assumes that my hotline, assumes that my case management, my training is working to some extent, right? But we'll get to that in a moment. Where is a place where I can set up my business objectives? I can assess whether my regulatory exposure updates to regulations I'm beholden to. Where can I model that to an extent? And then, as we talked about, number 4 on the effective compliance program guidelines, risk assessments. where can I conduct a truly focused compliance risk assessment that I can then be a partner to my colleagues that might be undertaking an enterprise risk assessment strategy. So where, rather than waiting for that to be handed down, where can I can really take upon my compliance risk assessment and understand, what are the key risks from a compliance perspective, uh, across our company, whether by business unit or holistically, and those are going to vary, and those need to be weighted and rolled up, from a regional all the way up to a corporate head office perspective. That can be done in the design area. What are the risk thresholds? And then now, how does that translate into program planning? And when you look across the market, this is where a lot of technology kind of leaves you to pick up the tab. And what I mean by that is moving into implementation. So that is really the power of an integrated technology solution, to where you now go from design into implementation really in one throw, where you can get into the policy management, the education, the third-party risk management, conflicts of interest, as we talked about, case management, and then hotline, not only for employees, but for suppliers as well. And then the third fundamental tenet from a capability standpoint is measurement, reporting and intelligence, actionable analytics. Again, not data for data's sake, but actually analytics that you can jump into a business process, either well performing or poorly performing, and take action. Benchmarking and trending. If there's one rallying cry I've heard from practitioners over the last few years, it's benchmarking and trending, and mostly because those are the questions that your stakeholders are asking. Where are we from last period? And then what are we doing about where are we from last period? Key risk indicators, that is the definite measure of, where are we going, right? So what are some of our key risk indicators that we are measuring ourselves again? And continuous monitoring is kind of a, for some of you might be kind of an aspirational goal, that says, how do we integrate with subsystems to kind of alert us to, trends that might be working in some of our transactional systems. So regardless, can be capabilities all brought to bear. And then this comes from the guidelines as well. What good is all this is if you can't turn the dial and make continuous improvements along the way. Okay, so that's from a capability standpoint, how we really drive ourselves within our technology to mirror the guidelines from the jurisdictions. Okay, now from a functional standpoint, this is what is very unique and differentiable about our technology, and we also say very thoughtful, because if you can't drive our organization to be thoughtful about that, then what have you. The first one is ownership experience, and when we say ownership experience is because there's a lot of characteristics within here. There is a very elegant ease of use user interface, time to value, measuring ourselves on deployment within days, and that's not an exaggeration, days, not weeks or months. A very ready customer service team and thought leadership. We do pride ourselves as practitioners, and we continue to work on our CPE credits just like everyone on this line probably does, and stay abreast of what's happening in the industry. So what does it look like? You've seen some elements of this already. Here is an example, as I said before, of kind of blending the design with the implementation. So here is a compliance risk assessment where key risks can be charted. So you can see here your top risks being corruption risk in Brazil and China being at the top of your heat map. But the nice thing here is that this now drives you into the policies that need to be driven to mitigate that risk. So you can see here, well, okay, maybe it's a key risk because you only have 25% attestation. to that policy. And that does now drive you through. So it shows the integration, but it also shows this very elegant ease of use that can be displayed here, that really see it, click it usability, not multiple screens that need to be clicked through. This is kind of the bar that we measure ourselves to. Multiple mediums, desktop, mobile, what have you. These kind of blocks here are by design as well, so they would come up on a tablet, what have you, and can be hit with fingers as well as mouse buttons. The second fundamental pillar, if you will, that is unique and differentiable, is actionable reporting and intelligence. And that's driving visibility and transparency from board to business line, as we've talked about quite a bit today. So native to the application are these very actionable dashboards. So again, there's a lot of talk about dashboards. There's a lot of talk about data, but again, this is not data for data's sake. This is drilling into a poorly performing or well-performing business process and being able to take action. So if you see over here, policy health are at high risk because you only have a 42% attestation rate. So what does that allow you to do? Well, let's kick off a campaign to drive better attestation rates. Maybe that's alerting regional management. And that's maybe that's singling out that 58% that have not attested and alerting their managers, what have you. It's taking action, rather than just allowing that to flash red on a dashboard. So it's the next step, really pull through. Here you see issues by type, just again, another lens that can be taken to data. And then yet again, policy health, different lenses, expired policies, very interesting. Just different ways that, again, compliance leaders can now play, if you will, indulge me, Moneyball, with either limited resources or limited staff. And this is exactly what our stakeholders want to see. They want to see that leadership. They want to see us looking forward, because we're in a dynamic state right now. And then this last piece, is very important. We are I think, from a functional perspective, which is very exciting if you're in this industry, as well as from a technology or a market. So if you think of where Convercent sits, and we're in a market just like your companies might be in a market, whether it's in a financial services or an energy market or a manufacturing and retail market, we sit in the technology market, right? So we look at this market, and we see still a lot of technology adoption ahead, and we see a lot of change in the compliance function as well. I think we all know that there's going to be continued change. Compliance and regulation isn't going away anytime soon, and to all of us that have chosen this market, that's pretty exciting. That's pretty exciting and allows us to continue to improve our craft. For us in the technology market, likewise. But there's this incredible paradox, is that the technology serving this market is at least 10 years old, in some cases 15 years old, and it's equivalent to carrying a Motorola StarTAC into battle. And our technology, even though we have 400 customers and we're a global organization, is 2.5 years old, and we made a conscious choice to do that. Built for cloud, which is a lot different than being not built for cloud and kind of backward engineered for cloud. So it's really developed to augment the pace of global, secure, dynamic enterprises. And with the security requirements, that is something also kind of ripped from the headlines. You see a lot of cybersecurity risks, a lot of intrusions. You can't depend on old technology to protect you anymore. So all three of these together, I think, paint a very unique and differentiable picture for what we bring to the market. So we wanted to spend some time in this discussion speaking to you about what we've released to the market this month. We've made it very portable and consumable. Again, you don't have to deploy all of this. You can deploy one, and what we said before, we'd like to draw out roadmaps with our clients. The risk manager really prioritizes initiatives based on risk severity. Again, there's a picture of that. The policy and learning manager can basically track policy health and also drive down into learning initiatives, either with a learning management system provided by Convercent or integration with your own learning management system. Disclosure management is, again, using that kind of very sensitive, multi-pronged, multi-allegation, robust workflow, measurability, conflict of interest risk, and then hotline and case manager, which again is also in the DOJ guidance that needs to be managed and responded to incident reports there. There's the case health issue investigation activity. So again, very portable, digestible, because again, back to the modern technology built for cloud, they can be brought up very quickly. We talk to clients, especially clients that are just starting down the path of risk assessments, and we say, hey, why don't we start with risk manager, and even just, in a very non-invasive way, start logging your top 10, top 25 risks. Get comfortable with the use of technology for that, in a very economical, quite honestly, fashion. And then bring that on and start bringing into the more, robust solutions. So, it is a new approach, and we're sincere about helping specifically the compliance function kind of embrace the challenges that are in front of us. So in summary, points to consider. As I was just saying just a few moments ago, for those of us who choose to work in this market, there is great opportunity exists to make a difference. It's not going to be straightforward. It's not going to be easy all the time, but there is great opportunity for us to make a difference. Compliance technology can be modern, elegant, secure, and as easy to use as consumer technology. That's kind of the bar we measure to ourselves to us, and we look to clear that bar really on a daily basis. We can support the board CEO and CFOs as risk oversight dominates their mind share. And the right technology can be an equalizer as requirements and measurements become more obtuse and sophisticated, and leveraging a risk-based approach, even though as compliance professionals, it's been pretty straightforward as regulations are binary. That's kind of become more more gray, right? So risk-based approach is kind of carrying the motion now. And I'm glad that we've tracked on that over the last year in our development efforts, in listening to you all, and we'll continue to be tightly partnered with you as we go forward. So in closing, we do have time for questions. If we don't get to them today, here is my contact information. I do tweet. I try to keep it to compliance-related information. You might be subjected to a picture of my kids or a few of my sports allegiances, but more or less it is around material related to our quest as practitioners. So with that, Jamie, what do we have on the question lines?
Thanks, Joe. We do have a few minutes, and if you want to submit your question, like Joe said, we'll either get to it today or he'll be sure to reach out to you and answer it right after the webinar. But let's just move straight into it. Joe, the first question is, FCPA has been a big ticket item in legislation and sentencing lately. What is the next big risk area you see coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's one I like to talk about too. And I think everyone knows FCPA is 35-plus-year-old law, and I think it really rose to prominence because our friends in the United Kingdom, in 2010, brought their own law to bear that took the FCPA and really strengthened that, times five, maybe more. And that coupled with our own, doubled up or strengthened enforcement efforts and the fines really brought that to bear. So I kind of like to answer this one differently, right? So it's almost like, excuse the analogy, but like picking stocks, right? So what's the next FCPA, right? Is it the China Secrecy Act we haven't even thought of? I prefer to think of it this way. It's more around what are you doing with kind of a holistic process based approach to regulatory compliance. So I think the FCPA approach, has kind of shown a light on that one. And I know that a lot of clients are still looking for, okay, there's a lot of regulations still swarming around. I heard a statistic recently, 200 new regulations a day. And, some people will say, what do we do with all these alerts? I actually was on a webinar, it's been within the last, year, where 600 people were on a webinar, and I was asked, how do you handle regulatory compliance? And 78% of the people said via email. Well, that's not trackable, valuable audit trail, and fast enough to handle something like this. So it isn't necessarily about the laws or the regs, and capturing those alerts, but adjudicating them. What I mean by that is putting those in the hands of the right subject matter experts, where they can say, okay, this does apply to us. Whereas a jurisdiction passes a new law. Or an example I like to say is if I'm an insurer and the state of West Virginia passes a law on seatbelts, if I have 50,000 premiums in that state, how do I make sure that I can assess the risk that has on my organization? And as a compliance function, how do I put that in the hands of the subject matter experts, have the look down capabilities, as it winds the way through. I know this law is going to go into effect on maybe Jan 1 of the next year, and I have an action plan that backs up to that. I put it in the hands of a collision expert, I put it in the hands of a legislative expert, I track that all the way along, and then we all kind of meet at the middle and make a determination of what we're going to do. So I think what FCPA and anti-corruption has done is shown a light on, there's probably a better procedural and process-based way that we can be handling regulatory compliance at a whole. So there's going to be more, right? There's going to be probably the next big flashstone reg, but I know that many companies are still kind of struggling with the adjudication of different regulatory events. And, I do think, and again, not because I'm playing the role of technologist, that technology can help this kind of morass of a process rather than flipping an alert via email to a big distribution list and saying, hey, what should we do about this new reg? There is a much better way.
Great, thanks, Joe. Being mindful that probably everyone has a meeting coming up right after this, we're going to go ahead and cut it off there. I apologize if we didn't get to your question. Like I said, we'll be reaching out shortly to make sure we get an answer for you. Just a reminder that we will be sending out a copy of this recording as well as a copy of the slides, so you can go through this at your own pace, share it with whoever you want, and just digest that information a little bit further. But thank you very much for attending our webinar today. We look forward to talking to you in the future, and have a lovely day.
Thanks, everyone. Good speaking with you.